Welcome to the Five Phenomenon Podcast. I am your host, Shane Hazen, and with me this week is, do you want to call yourself a guest host or the guest? Because your name's going to be in the title, so...
Whichever you prefer.
Aaron Smith, manager of Showplace Cinemas East. You are the second guest on the podcast, and it's been less than a year, and you're already returning back.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, that's I feel so Carson-esque right now.
No, but I had a great time when I was here because I don't get to see you as often as we used to.
Well, especially now.
So it was terrific just to catch up.
Yeah. So we were trying to figure out if we're going to do a typical. We haven't been doing the normal intros where I talk about what I've seen this week, but you mentioned maybe we should. What have you watched this week that was interesting?
I've been watching a documentary series called Civilization.
No, I don't know anything about it.
It was kind of like the precursor to Cosmos, the Carl Sagan thing.
Yeah. And
it came out in I think '67. But it's 13-part documentary series. It's about European art.
Where are you watching it on?
I downloaded it.
Yeah, Aaron Smith is a master torrenter.
No, it's available on YouTube.
Oh.
It's everywhere. I downloaded it because I wanted a higher quality copy.
Did you watch any of the new Neil deGrasse Tyson one?
I did. I didn't like it as much. It was fine.
It was fine.
Did you watch it?
I wanted to. It just seems like something in HD would be great.
You wouldn't hate it.
I wouldn't hate it.
Really like it that
much. I've been alternating so wildly between trying to get a movie in a night and then turning out to get a movie in a week if I'm lucky. But I watched Mo Better Blues last night for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would have been a year after Do the Right Thing. It was interesting because it had kind of a similar structure where it was very rambling character base, a main character who's a little bit of a philanderer kind of wandering through, and then it builds towards a piece of violence, and then there's just kind of an epilogue to it. And also I kind of got that vibe that Spike Lee was figuring out what he was doing with his career and artistic talent after Do the Right Thing and the celebration of Do the Right Thing, which, I love Malcolm X and, 25th Hour, I think, is some people consider the best of the decade, but there's an argument to say he hasn't. Black Klansman's great. That Do the Right Thing was it, or was the top, as he's never matched Do the Right Thing.
I think that would be hard to do. It was also a cultural phenomenon. It was of its time.
You're, as soon as you said it, I was like, I think it's a petty a way of judging an artist at that point, just because certain reactions like that are out of an artist's control, and just because an artist hits the zeitgeist at the right moment, they shouldn't be shortchanged from it too. I was listening to an interview with Liz Phair with Have you listened to any of Shirley Manson's podcast where she interviews different people about songs that changed their career?
No, I have not.
It's great, but she had Liz Phair on there talking about 6 Feet One, which is the first song on Exile from Guyville, and she asked Liz Phair, is like, do you resent Exile and Guyville because everyone's measuring you by it? And she responded, it's like, well, at first I did, but eventually I started thinking that album as a friend that's been with me all these years.
Still pays the bills.
So the reason I wanted to have you on this week, Smith, is you've been managing through the pandemic.
Off and on, sure.
Yeah. So
that's what I do.
So when was the first week that they closed down? It would have been back in March?
Yeah, it was mid-March, maybe late March.
And was it just a very sudden thing when it happened?
Yes and no. I think you could have seen it coming, and I think we kind of expected it, but as soon as the studios started to pull content, it just wasn't
this would have been before the statewide stay-at-home happened.
That I think it was slightly before that, but not long, and it was just a week or so, maybe even 2 weeks before there was the statewide mandated shutdown. So we have been closed for a little while.
How long were you out?
But I could be totally wrong on that.
Because it's 6 months ago might as well be 6 years ago at this point.
It feels like it, yeah. Yeah, I've gained and lost probably 50 pounds since then.
Um, so before this, what was the longest period you were away from the theater?
A week at a time, yeah.
That's what
Never more than a week.
Yeah. So how long was the first uh, session gone? For how long were you out for the first round?
We came back early June for about 3 weeks, so there was a considerable length of time, and it it took a while to get used to it, and of course, the habits that you form after obviously a long number of years. Just staying up all night because I only worked nights, which
Yeah.
I actually still kind of do. I prefer it that way, but those things are odd. But you get used to it after a while. I just didn't get used to the just constant snacking.
You've been posting some really pretty vacation photos of like intermediate, like going to state parks near here around there. You've been doing that with the kids.
Yeah, that was honestly the best thing about it is that we got to do we had time to spend together that you don't get. You don't get 3 months to spend with your young children at any point in your life. So I really wanted to take advantage of it, and hopefully I did. I think partially, you wind up trying to show your children your heritage. Like, these are things that my parents took me to do, things that I remembered, things that I really enjoyed. So it was kind of trying to toe the line between dragging them to do something that I wanted to do, and then also kind of sharing my love for those experiences with them.
What places did you go?
Oh, we went tons of places. We went to Hemlock Cliffs, which is in the Hoosier National Forest. We went to Indiana Dunes, which is a national park on Lake Michigan. We went to Rock
That's a pretty
Island
far
State
trip,
Park
isn't
in
it?
It's about 5 hours, sure.
Okay.
Every place we went was within reasonable driving distance because we were supposed to go to Yellowstone, and since that was kind of a big trip that got canceled, we made a bunch of small trips. But almost every one of the trips that we took was within 3.5 hours drive, and just except for a few places weren't crowded. There in fact many of those places we were the only people there.
That makes sense. Were these day trips then? Even the
Almost
5 hour
always
ones?
there. Sometimes we would stay one night, but we really didn't want to stay unless we absolutely had to, because at the time, you get more comfortable with it, and I guess this is how we all are getting, is that you get more comfortable with it. So we would maybe stop and get something to eat, but initially we were taking all of our food. We would only go places outside, and then we wouldn't stop. But then eventually I think you get used to it, and if you I feel comfortable with the kids because they were good about washing their hands. At least one of them is good.
So speaking of being comfortable with it, so what's it like when you were back?
I can only speak for myself. I feel more comfortable there than I do at Target, because when I go to Target, and especially if I've got the kids with me, I feel like there's more people closer in my personal space there than since I've been back to work, because we've been back now for 3 weeks or so, and it's not busy, but there's a reasonable amount of people coming, and so people tend to, or at least they have definitely since March, kind of keep their distance, and most people are being safe. I think when people have this image of, especially our theater, because it is traditionally crowded. You're people on top of people, selling out shows. Excuse me. And it hasn't been like that. It hasn't really even been all that busy. So a lot of times you can sit and watch a movie and only have 5 or 6 other people in there. So it's kind of a really nice process. Hopefully, well, I mean, it's hard to say what will happen.
So
But hopefully, if people get a chance to, come and see how the process works now, I think it's different, and to me, it's more laid back. It seems less stressful. The customers, don't seem as stressed about. I think people are having a good time. honestly though, the bottom line is the content, and if I don't have anything that people want to come to see, then no one's going to give it a chance.
Did you see what's showing at AMC this week?
Yeah, they got Kajillionaire, which I thought might be interesting.
Oh, I'm almost tempted to go back for it. 'Cause, I love Miranda July.
Well, that's actually that was something that I thought, because we saw Tenet together, you and I and Ted.
We were going to. I guess we should tell that story too.
Right. Well, I mean, I think this is where it fits in for me.
Okay.
So we saw Tenet, and I had been back to work maybe a solid week at that time. So, and of course I'm always there, so I'm comfortable.
This would have been the first time you sat in an auditorium for a full length movie, though?
With other people, yeah, definitely. I had screened. No, actually, I think it was definitely. Because we came in a week early, we cleaned everything down to the floor. So that actually was the first, and of course it was my day off, so I came back to work on my day off just to see that movie with you.
Yeah. So I know I kind of in my head thought Tenet was going to be the movie I was going to break for, and what I was doing in advance was checking how full the auditorium was, and it was. I mean, you guys are good. You have was it 2 seats on each side, or?
Mm-hmm. Buffer seats on each side.
I wish there was an option of no seats front or back, but at the same time, and my idea was also I wanted to get the back row so that way no one would be breathing onto you, and we got second to last row with someone who, a mutual friend of ours who kind of they weren't that talkative, but they were just for
they're chatty.
My antsiness were too. And did you notice how I was acting?
Yeah, no, I could tell that you definitely were not comfortable.
Okay, because what happened was we were sitting with you and Ted has a very distinct policy on all movies that he will not leave the theater until the credits are done. He's trained his nephew to do the same thing too. And so you were sitting on one side and he was sitting on the other side and you both were sitting up there.
Oh, when you were blocked in.
Yeah, I stood up for a second and then the credits went up and I thought we were done. And then we stood there for a second and there was just this like old way of watching a movie where we sat down and we're just like gathering ourselves, and I was just like wanting to bolt for those doors. And I don't know if you heard me, but I said, "Can we get the fuck out of here right now?"
No, I didn't. And I mean, if you're uncomfortable, I understand that.
Okay.
But that hasn't been my experience or my reaction. I understand.
Do you? I mean, like, are there coughing people in the theater? Do you guys obviously have?
I would notice if and you recognize those things now that you didn't previously. So if someone is coughing, I would certainly take note of that. But it just hasn't been an issue. I actually do think, most people, if they aren't feeling well, they're not going to go to a movie because they know if they start coughing in the movie theater, other people are going to get up and leave, or they're going to complain.
Oh, the other day I was in a place and I had to sneeze.
What place was this?
It was just some restaurant,
Where was it?
Some takeout place. I can't remember which one, but I had to sneeze and I went outside to sneeze and came back in. I think it was licks.
Yeah. Well, shouldn't you always do that though? Because that is pretty gross.
I mean, now it's just
especially if you can. I'm not saying because if it's
you can't. Well,
if it comes on you, there's really not a whole lot you can do. But
it's also the question of what we're going to be doing after this for years afterwards, and how we're going to react to, like, is everyone doing a Dracula sneeze after this point, or? But you guys aren't doing temperature checks, but I've had this argument with friends.
We're doing temperature checks for employees, not for customers.
What does a temperature check do if you have 2 to however many days asymptomatic?
Well, we check the employees' temperature, and obviously if it was high, we would send them home. But there's no way for me to know what that means. Right. It could have just, but I think you're trying to be as safe as possible.
No,
so even if that person's not infected with COVID, possibly they have the flu or a cold or allergic to cats. I don't know, but I just, we don't want to take that chance.
Are you guys getting anything new this week?
I don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure. Everything is so day to day, unfortunately, and I think same thing happened when they eventually decided to push Wonder Woman to Christmas. We had there had been rumors that that was going to move,
Mm-hmm.
but the studio waits literally 3 weeks before a movie's supposed to open, and then decides, well, we're pushing our movie back to Christmas when the spot that it vacates leaves a giant gap, and so everybody that came back for Tenet was basically relying on Wonder Woman being there because Tenet is as good as it is, and I guess we didn't really finish that conversation about it because I did kind of want to get your take and not just about
Yeah.
the movie or how you felt, but also what makes you feel uncomfortable about being, because like I said, I'm there every day. I feel safe there. It is kind of a second home.
It dives into the whole, it's not just about me feeling uncomfortable getting something. It's also the worry that if I have something and I'm asymptomatic, then I'm spreading it when I shouldn't be spreading it. And then going to the movie theater feels like a vice that I shouldn't be endangering other people with. And okay, Tenet we can also talk about the movie of Tenet, because Tenet
I wanted to.
Tenet, the thing, I mentioned this on this last episode. I closed in the last episode about this. The problem I found going to the drive-in last week that
I saw Evil Dead.
Yeah, and Evil Dead 2 is awesome. But you can't get at the theater right now. It's not just about going into a theater and being with people. It's about being with a crowd of people that are alive and reacting to the movie. And right now we're hoping for dead theaters, or theaters where I'm the only person in it. And so then all you're going for is a big screen and surround sound. And before we were recording, Smith was trying to fix my receiver upstairs. I got 7.1 upstairs, so I got good sound. So Kajillionaire, I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm also of a mind. I almost thought about driving. They're showing at the Belcourt at the drive-in there. I thought about driving down there, but then I was just like, I can rent it and watch it at home. Especially the prices they have for the new movies. It's $20 for most new movies to rent.
Is that right?
Yeah, I had to pay $20 for Bill and Ted, which was
Bill
and Ted was worth it, but
I think the studio and
their argument is the argument I've heard is that if they're renting for a family, that's still worthwhile.
No, I agree. And when you rent it for $20, you can watch it numerous times, right? It's not just a one-time.
I usually go through Amazon. Typically what they do is you have 48 hours to start it, and once you start it, you can watch it on repeat for 24 hours.
Oh, wow. Then that's probably, I think with Mulan, Disney was giving you unlimited access once you pay the $30.
Yeah,
I could be, none of this could be true.
I think that was the Disney Plus or whatever.
Right. So you paid for the normal service, the $10 a month,
which I
plus
thought
the $30.
That was an absolute crock of shit.
And really, I don't think got what they wanted out of that.
Did you hear that? Someone was trying to tell me that, or I saw an article that it made more money than Tenet did doing that. Well, although there's this thing, Warner Brothers not reporting their actual money.
The difference between those two, and this is what I wanted to say about Tenet, and if everyone was assuming that was the film that was going to save the theaters, I think that was a mistake. Let's say, for instance, there was no pandemic and Tenet came out at its original release date. I just don't think Tenet's going to be that successful.
Well, now that we've seen it,
it's too dense. It's cryptic, and it's obviously a quasi Bond film.
I was going to say, do we just want to dive into it? The movie is
it's not something most audiences want to see. And when I say most audiences, I mean I can't imagine my wife or children being interested in sitting through Tenet at all, because you and I, we're the target audience. And I actually liked the movie quite a bit. I think I liked it more than you did. In fact, I'm sure I did. I definitely was entertained. It was very entertaining. It was thought-provoking. It's not his best film, but I did like it quite a bit, and it certainly falls in his filmography. It doesn't stand out as great or poor.
For me, what it is I think that he has continued his development of trying to make spectacle. He's gone to the next stage on spectacle, and each movie needs to be bigger in some way. And I think that he's continued that with the backwards forwards gimmick. Like, it's really interestingly shot. It's interesting setup. The story plays within some really interesting ways. But I'm not the first person to comment that this is just a Bond movie with a sci-fi gimmick that's really kind of glued onto it. Like that, I think that was what was more disappointing than anything else. I thought there was going to be a really interesting reason why that was happening, and the explanations were weak. But the commentary I've had with other friends about the movie is that ever since Interstellar, it's clear Christopher Nolan I want to say he's very progressive and always coming up with an interesting sound design, but he's got a bug in his bonnet about dialogue is not necessary, but then he writes very expository based screenplays where lines of dialogues explain twists and moves and even weirdly key phrases that you have to pay attention to. And I don't know if this is a case of him just not giving his dialogue editor rein, or just ignoring his dialogue editor, because the tracks are clear. I mean, the clearest example we have of this is you were working whenever Dark Knight Rises prologue went into the theaters, so you saw the pre-sequence and you saw the old Bane dialogue, and then when the movie came out, it was very clear. Bane's dialogue in the movie of Dark Knight Rises is very clear, but you saw the IMAX prologue that came out the Christmas before. It was indecipherable, completely indecipherable. It was interesting, but it was indecipherable. And it's a counterintuitive filmmaking technique on Nolan's part is my problem. On top of the movie itself, I mean, there's something about, there's the plot line of trying to like save the world for your children, which I found that Nolan was much more touching in Interstellar. And there's some vague mention that the whole backwards thing is just because we have to start over because we've already ruined the planet and ruined existence, which, okay, that's kind of interesting. But for the most part, it's Nolan making a Bond movie that's supposed to be as disposable and Nolan, I love him to death. He can be funny, but his movies aren't necessarily fun, effervescent things in of themselves. I mean, I think that multiple people I've read comment that this is one of the weakest Nolan movies probably since Insomnia.
Okay, but having said that, Memento, Insomnia, and obviously those are earlier films.
Memento, I should not have said Memento. Memento's great.
So is Insomnia. So, I mean, Dunkirk. What's
Insomnia's
the least of his films?
Insomnia. Or following,
do you think
maybe.
So?
Yeah, Insomnia. I mean, have you seen the original?
Oh, yeah. I'd like Insomnia just fine.
I like it. It's great. It's just kind of...
I think if let's say, for instance, so you don't think, I'm assuming you don't think Tenet is his worst movie? Or is it in the bottom third?
Well,
my point is it's still high quality.
Well, I think that's actually we're on the same page there. Just because I am also of the mind that complaining about something as good as Tenet is why we can't have good things, and also there's a lot external going into my reaction to Tenet, just because it was like I felt guilty going. I felt guilty.
I could tell
going with And it's a movie I thought I needed to have a theatrical experience with, but at the same and see it for the first time in a theatrical experience. But then I didn't see the reason why I went back for that. Like if Dune is as amazing as I hope it is, and by the way, have you been playing that trailer?
Oh, well, yeah, sure.
If Dune is as amazing as it looks, and I go back for that and I enjoy that, we'll have a different conversation. Although, I mean, again, I was thinking about going for Kajillionaire, or what's the Broken Hearts
Gallery?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I even kind of want to see that. And I thought, if I can get a back row seat, empty, should I go for that if I'm going to be by myself?
I don't want to speak for you. I think, like I said, I'm comfortable there. And my children came. We're showing the first two Harry Potter films. We're showing a lot of catalog movies right now. They came to see Harry Potter. I did not feel like a bad parent or uncomfortable that they were there. And I do realize there's more risk there than there would be if we didn't go, but I still think it's relatively low. I think that They're safe. We're safe. It's relatively safe. You're much less safe on the road to get there.
Just because of the statistics of driving.
Traffic, yeah, of course. And I realize maybe that's bullshit, but it isn't. You know.
Well, the thing that's got me paranoid is the air conditioning. Anytime I'm indoor, I'm just like,
oh, really?
Yeah, well, that's what that was.
Oh, do you? Okay.
That's why I'm like, oh, I'm keeping distance. I'm washing my hands.
Are you?
I got my
before
mask on.
this. Did you spend a lot of time with hand sanitizer? Are you a germaphobe?
No.
Really?
No. Our family has a.
Well, it seems like you have a strong. You know,
I understand of hand washing.
If you lived with your grandmother, you know, where you just felt like, you know, there's no margin for error. I cannot make this mistake because it will be devastating. And I know what you said about how the greater good. Obviously, I don't want to pass it on, even if it doesn't affect me. But
I had these conversations with Ted early on about how.
Well, Ted is a good example because I do feel like, you know, we're all relatively old, but Ted's a little older.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, he may be getting to this area. I'm sorry, Ted. I'm so sorry. He may be getting to this area where he is high risk.
Well, he's recovering from heart surgery.
The heart surgery. You know, it's not. It's been almost 10 years, I bet.
No, I'm saying, but he's still he'd probably be an at-risk person because of that too.
I think
he said
I am. You are also. I mean, you're the youngest of us, but you know,
no, I get.
You're not going to get carded.
Shit, what was I going to say about Ted?
Ted, I've seen him since he came to see Inception, and if he was going to wear a mask and he wants it to cover his face, he really needs to do something about his beard. Because, do you know what I'm saying? That to me was a big.
I got concern. A beard. It's the beard.
Yeah, but he has a kind of a fluffier Dan Haggerty style beard. So his mask was just kind of a postage stamp in the center of it, whereas I think yours would still cover your face.
It does. Ted and I had this conversation early on, right when everyone first started to stay at home, where we were both like, "This is our lives. Like we live by ourselves. If we need to be stuck at home, we've got all this media to watch or read. Like, why do we need to go outside?" And I think part of my guilt is that it's just this weird compounded thing where, like, I know, like, I had this feeling that whenever everyone was stuck at home, I was like, you guys are stuck with me the way I have to be most of the time.
Well, but did you do all those things you said you were going to? Did you finish your stack of novels to read or movies you planned on watching? Or did you watch something else completely different that you had never intended to watch?
It took me a little while, but I've been on a really good reading kick lately.
See, that's, you know, like you said, the first thing you thought is all this media. So you planned on listening to records and, you know, you were going to catch up on everything and you were going to familiarize yourself with the works of X and X, and you didn't do anything. At least I didn't. I wound up doing a lot of things that I really hadn't planned on, and my to-do pile is roughly the same size.
There is a feeling the to-do pile got...
It was me, not the pile. I'm the problem.
It was always me. It was always you inside Aaron Smith. No, there's definitely I forget what the term is, time scarcity or time famine. There's definitely that going on, and I still have that feeling like every day I just I go to bed, I still got shit to do, more shit to do, and it's not an obligation. It's something that's enriching and entertaining, but
it's a personal obligation.
Okay, so
you already paid for it.
But it's something. It's a talisman sitting on my shelf, my bookshelf of books that I haven't read, but I bought and was aware of.
It's symbolic of your intentions.
Yeah. So Showplace made the big announcement this week that everything was closing for the time being except East. Is this all the city? Because the Newburgh bar is still open, right? Or the restaurant?
The restaurant, and then they also have like a game room. So and to me this is kind of mind blowing to me, because the restaurant and the game center, they're doing fine. People show up there, and I guess that really it it really proves the point that it's content based. And that's, not to bring this around to Tenet again, but I almost have to. That was never going to be the movie that saved cinema. It was made for a very specific audience. And when you talk about the sound design, how loud it is, and how sometimes you literally can't follow the dialogue, and it almost requires a second viewing just to kind of make sense of it, or if you didn't read review after review. So
I've been really close to going to a second viewing, just if I know if I'm in an empty theater. But then I come back to the reason I don't want.
What works really well the second time through are the relationship with Neil and the protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really sweet the second time through. The central love story still doesn't work well, and so you're right. I think obviously the relationship in Inception, there's a heart to that that Tenet doesn't have.
No.
So you certainly do lose some audience, but I feel like either Inception had similar sound design. I wonder if they didn't take more care in making sure that dialogue was audible, like you could follow the story.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the other side of this where a director just flat out, or kind of dismisses it and says, like, that's fine. Like, they can hear it. And the problem happens is if you've heard it 1,000 times, you assume everyone's going to hear it.
Absolutely. Well, that's when you talk about Bane's voice. They just kept tweaking the voice till the voice had that timbre that they wanted, where it would kind of rumble in your belly or, scratch your eardrum. But it was difficult for other people to take in. They had spent too much time with it.
The story,
it was their baby.
The story I told Ted, I'm not going to name names, but
or Sonic's teeth.
I've heard this story. I worked with somebody who worked with a major filmmaker, and there was a movie of theirs that came out that was one of the most laughably bad sound designs in there. And I was talking to this sound person who works in the sound department on it, and they told me that filmmaker had paid for an extra 2 weeks on the sound mix, and also on that movie or movie previous, what had happened was a gun had gone off next to the ear of that filmmaker, and that filmmaker was deaf in one ear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it worked for Brian Wilson.
So, do you think if Mulan had gone theatrical, what would have happened?
Well, I think more people, more of a general audience, would have come out for that, and I know this for a fact because I answer the phone every day. Okay, and if I get 15 calls in a day, 10 of them are people asking me if we're open. So clearly that's a problem. But then I also still get phone calls about Mulan, and I think people and the thing I don't understand, and this only makes sense, and obviously I'm looking at it from a perspective that didn't include having all these giant theme parks that didn't make any money all summer, so they're in a different level of panic than I am. But to me, if you're going to charge $30 for people to rent your movie on Disney Plus, in addition to the fee that they're already paying for the app, why wouldn't you also screen that theatrically? Because I'm sure at this point,
well, it's Disney. Their whole shtick is exclusivity. I mean, it's the reason they vault so many of the movies, and there's the threat of them vaulting so many 20th Century Fox movies now too.
I think that makes sense, but when you're talking about short term, when they had so much money invested, and a big part of the reason that they felt like we can do this on the app exclusively is because they expected it to open huge overseas, and that didn't happen. If you hedge your bets, you have day and date where it plays on demand, and instead of charging 30, maybe they charge 10 plus the Disney Plus admission. But then you also play it in select theaters, because obviously you can't play it in New York and LA yet. There are still some other places that are closed. So you play it on theaters that are available. You make, let's say for instance, they earned, just like with Tenet, they make anywhere from 10 to 12, maybe 20 million in a weekend. That's $20 million you didn't make. And it was there on the table for the taking.
Well, I mean, didn't Tenet make some money worldwide?
It did okay, but again, even worldwide, I still think that it's a movie with a limited audience.
Well, what's nice about with that analysis is that I remember someone pointing. I've seen some article that was crapping on Tenet's box office in general, and I was just like, "Come on, are we not grading this movie on a curve?" So, like, the movie that you make the point is probably not as accessible as it should have been. I always when it comes
Well,
to
when you say they should have been, I don't think that's fair. I think he made the movie he wanted to make as loud as he wanted to make it, and that's who he made it for. I don't think that he was really considering, well, this kind of excludes a big portion of a theater going audience, and also even on a secondary market when that eventually comes to HBO or Netflix. A lot of people still aren't going to watch Tenet because it's too dense.
I'm
It's
not
not for everyone.
I don't mean to be crapping on such a great achievement of a movie because I do want to make sure I make it clear Christopher Nolan credit where credit's due. I find I have a few directors who I think are maybe the heir apparent to Kubrick, and Nolan is that in regards to someone who's really trying to make uh, giant spectacle that's also high art, or trying their best to mix the two, or trying to make some kind of or sophisticated evolution in film technique, or show you stuff you haven't seen before. And the thing is, he's on a tightrope right now. Like, he hasn't had a real failure. And if this is as close as these get, he also has such a great excuse, and this is still a great movie. I mean, again, shitting on this is why we can't have good things, or why I can't have good things.
But that also isn't fair to expect you to grade it on a curve simply because of the environment in which it came out. That isn't. I mean, I feel like
What do you
I
think?
would have liked the movie the same regardless.
That's what do you think the critical reaction would have been if this had been a normal summer?
Roughly what it is. I don't think most people,
Really?
the reviews haven't been bad, and they haven't been raves. I think a lot of people have said, and even the things that you said about it aren't untrue. It's just that the level to which you feel like that harms the film isn't the same level that I do. Like I I had more problems with the sound design, I think, than you did because I felt like it was oppressive. Like it was very, very loud. And I had the advantage of seeing several scenes again to clarify some of these things. And so that's why, um, I feel like I may like the movie more than you did because I've had a chance to go back and kind of connect those dots because at what point was there a point during your initial viewing, and you've still only seen it once, right?
Mm-hmm.
And was there a point where you just gave up and said, okay, well, I'm not going to try and follow the plot. I'm just going to just ride this one out or were you comfortable with when I don't want to get into depth because I don't want to say any spoilers.
I don't. There's definitely movies I think that you follow, even though you don't follow. Like I always had this. Like I wouldn't want to take a quiz on the movie afterwards, but I mean, even
we would have got a passing grade, but we probably wouldn't have done very well.
There's a big thing I've always used to do whenever I was running test screenings on movies I'd edited. What we do is, when a screening went bad, what would happen is one person would be the most vocal person, and they take over and they'd say like, well, you felt this way, and then you dread, and they'd almost make the room go along with them just because their comprehension suddenly became the other room's comprehension, and everyone just glonked on to what they were willing to say out loud that they actually paid attention to, or what details they actually got in. And I'd always dread the moment when they'd say like, well, you knew, or when anybody would say like, well, you knew when this character's name was happening with, because I didn't want anyone to like say the details, volunteer the details for others to be like, because everyone has to pretend like, oh yeah, I got that point.
I did know that.
I was paying attention to that the whole time.
Well, I'll be willing to admit this. I was probably a third of the way into the movie before I recognized. So this whole time we've been playing this trailer for this movie, I knew Christopher Nolan has this film he's working on. It's called Tenet. All this time I knew the title of the film. Maybe 40 minutes into the movie, I'm like, oh, Tenet's a palindrome.
The one I'll give you.
So
some
things are obvious that you still don't get.
The big one I'll give you is that there's a device. The big thing that allows things to go backwards and forwards in time. I don't understand exactly why that was suddenly introduced or when that was introduced. I just suddenly knew. Oh, there's a scene.
It's a little convenient. It makes sense. I watched that sequence again when. Well, I don't want to do spoilers because it's not fair. It's still a new movie, and even for you, I don't want to do spoilers because what I am doing now is I'm in that screening and I'm volunteering information for you, and I don't want to do that either.
No. I mean, you can be vague, can't you? What?
Yes and no, but
you're a better man than I, because one of the problems Ted's pointed out about the format of the show is we especially when we dive into random movies is that we're just like. Yeah, here's a movie no one's ever seen. Let's talk spoilers right away.
Yeah. No, but I think the beauty of that, though, is that, you guys talked about some movies that I think some people are probably never going to want to watch. But then when you do like Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, you kind of put the format at first with that movie.
It will. Oh man, dude.
But then again,
it was so cool.
To get back to that, cool. I love the drive-in experience. And not just this season, but we've gone every year, even before we had kids. Ever since me and my wife first started dating, we would go to the drive-in at least once a year.
How do you watch drive-in movies? You go to Holiday Drive-In, right?
Yeah, and I've been to the Henderson Drive-In closed while we were still first dating, but I actually preferred that one because they had and I love the food at the drive-in, but they had like a shrimp basket. Like they went all out over there. They had fried chicken. I mean, it was
nothing like the Henderson Kentucky drive-in.
It was very
interesting.
Basket. It was interesting. It was a cool little place. Just like I think the Holiday has kind of outgrown itself. You can't really say that's a cool little place because it really isn't sprawling at this point.
But it's always been sprawling, though. It's weird because I pointed this out last episode. I went in, I guess it would be 95 for Twister, and then this year is the first year I've been since then. But also it's not been open that much. Like they stopped opening when weekdays when schools started back up. And
well, they're open every summer. I think though, and I don't want to speak for you, but I will speak for myself. It's a terrible way to actually watch a movie you have never seen, because unless you have, headphones, some relatively decent headphones that you're going to connect to the sound system, the sound's going to be terrible. And then the ambient light outdoors, because if they start at 8:00, the sun doesn't go down to 8:30. It's just not it's a great experience.
That's not been too much of a problem. The ambient light.
I think you'd
the
be
headlights
surprised,
obviously kind of
depending upon what night of the year you go, what the moon phase is. A lot of these are factors that will affect the quality of the screening. I love the experience, but I think it's a terrible way I would not want to watch Tenet for the first time there. It would be an awful experience.
No. Tenet's definitely.
It worked. Evil Dead works because you're familiar with the movie.
I mean,
aren't you?
Yeah, and there's also a certain amount. Well, the other reason I thought that was perfect is, especially with the first one, maybe not so much the second one, being such a low budget, there's a certain cheapness factor, and so the sound is, if you're getting tinny sound from it, it's.
How did you listen? Did you just
radio,
car speakers?
Yeah, no, and that was the worst part because I've been going to these movies by myself, and this is the first one Ted went with me, and then I've been watching it on the back of my Prius hatchback, and I can fit by myself there, but with Ted there, then we had to figure something out. So one person sat to the side and one person sat in the hatchback. And also, as much as I want them to keep showing movies, it was pretty cold and we weren't properly covered.
You were ill prepared.
I had a jacket and it was so cold.
Well, it's the drive-in. You're supposed to bring a blanket.
How did
bug spray and a blanket?
Yeah, no, I never bring bug spray, and I always should. How did you? So how do you know? Do you guys get the radio and a blanket?
Yeah, and in fact, one time we had to get a jump when it was over because the battery was dead in our vehicle.
That seems like that would be a constant problem.
But even if my wife has a Kia van, the sound system is it's shit. So the movie sounds like shit, and I think honestly, if you were honest about it, comparatively, it doesn't really look great either. But it's just it's fun.
Oh, it's
I'm
fun. It's
not
so much fun.
the
That
experience is fun, but again, it's just like you were saying. You went with Ted. It is kind of a communal thing. The drive-in is would be more fun if you could go sit outside, and not be concerned about. I think most people right now are going to the drive-in as an alternative,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
I could be
It's-
wrong.
I mean, that was the reason I was going. There's a reason. I mean,
Sure.
even as excited as I was to see Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, same reason we went. It's I'm not going. I haven't gone to any of Showplace's showings of. Do you have any opinions on? I'm not sure if you can speak to this, but the movies you guys are showing right now. Like, do we need to see Goonies again?
Well, it's Goonies, to be perfectly honest, and it's interesting that you would pick that one because we have shown lots of catalog titles. Goonies has probably been the most popular catalog title because it does appeal to kids, parents with children, young audiences, and then also the nostalgia group, which I guess would be probably me. You might even be too young for it.
Yeah,
but
I am.
yeah, for me personally, I mean, the Goonies, Gremlins, the Back to the Future movies,
Well,
Jurassic Park.
no,
Jurassic Park.
Those last two was one of the best drive-in screenings, double features I went to. It was super cool. That was
Yeah.
great. That was great.
I think that might just be, how you feel about the film already, and then going to that screening kind of pushes that button for you. Because I don't know, I don't think I will ever in my life again. And there are movies that I enjoyed, like Back to the Future or Ghostbusters. I don't know if I'll ever just be like, I really want to watch those movies.
You're kidding?
Again.
No,
it's just too many.
I'll give you that on Jurassic Park, but Back to the Future.
Yeah, but I don't even like Jurassic Park. So
Jurassic Park has the T-Rex sequence in the middle is kind of it's kind of definitive Spielberg, but
it is.
But
and I mean, it's popular for a reason. I just don't. But the Fast and the Furious movies are popular for a reason, and that's not for me either. So I just Jurassic.
There's the argument that Back to the Future and Ghostbusters are just great, perfect blockbuster movies. Like they're just the movies that work with the audience better than anything else.
Well, a movie like that, and I'm not necessarily putting this in a category, but a movie that I think I would bear repeat viewings for me would be something like Groundhog Day, or because I mean, and maybe I am an '80s kid, so I should be excited about Back to the Future and Jurassic, and not necessarily that's '90s, but Goonies and Gremlins. I don't know. It's just I that was never. Those were always the most popular films, and the movies that I liked then probably weren't all that popular, and so I wouldn't be. I'm not all that interested. And you brought it up for a reason, and I think it's because you feel the same way.
Yeah.
Although I don't know. Maybe your experience with Back to the Future wasn't just a nostalgia trip. I don't know, but it feels like that's the best you can get from something like that.
Maybe. I mean, the specifics on Back to the Future is also, it's like, you have those movies, like you make a point you haven't seen in a few years, and when you see it again, it's like watching, there's a little bit of you're seeing it for the first time again. Or Back to the Future is a movie I've seen many, many times, and I haven't seen it in a few years. So this is a great screening. It was just, but
I to more to your point, or at least what I hope is maybe mildly deflecting or transferring your point, is that I love catalog titles. Catalog movies are, and all the movies that I watched over quarantine were, particularly old films. I don't think I watched anything that was made after about 1980. So I was going on my way. The movies that I were choosing were movies that I'd seen once, maybe run to rewatch, or maybe even never watched.
Well, Ted made this point to me that I found fascinating, was that for him, it's definitely, this entire thing has been his to watch list, because nothing new's coming out, or realistically not much news coming out.
I felt like he might be a little better organized with that than you and I are, where he would be like, I'm going to get down to this stack of films that I've been meaning to watch, because
you've seen his house. He's got quite a few stacks of those.
He does, and I know kind of when it falls over, he rebuilds and then adds to it. So I'm sure his to-do stack is still fairly significant.
So are the Harry Potter movies doing well?
Oh yeah, but that's exactly what I'm saying.
No.
Those
the
audiences, the Harry Potter with people can bring their children. Honestly, one of the things that I think the drive-in is doing that I wish we would do more of is potentially bringing in, a horror film, because those seem to be playing well at the drive-in, and they're going out of their way to really court that audience.
Mm-hmm.
So they played Scream, which I don't necessarily love. They played The Ring, the Evil Dead films.
Yeah, I saw I saw From Dusk Till Dawn. I saw Scream From Dusk Till Dawn for the first time in forever, and Evil Dead had a very specific bumper in front of it. It was like Grindhouse Releasing was putting it out.
Oh yeah, I think that didn't come from a studio, because I don't know who even owns that now.
The Scream From Dusk Till Dawn, they both had the old Miramax logos, new Miramax logos in front of them. So there was a new DCP to them, and Evil Dead had Bruce Campbell with a very funny new intro wearing a mask, reminding people to wear a mask. So it seems like they're putting it on the drive-ins.
Yeah, I think that was aimed toward the drive-in audience, but because the drive-in audience this summer has been much wider than it normally would be, so that's an audience that they didn't normally have. So
yeah,
I think that's smart. If you could, and obviously Back to the Future's out, if you could just pick 5-10 movies that you'd be like, listen, it would be great if this was released and back in the cinema, and I would go and sit and watch this film, and I would make a point to drive and pay for a ticket to see this. Are there movies like that for you, or is that just something you wouldn't even do right now?
Well, I think the key for me is or the real question for me is, the other big issue I've had about going to the movies right now is we don't have access to crowds of people. And even if we did have access to crowds of people, I've had this conversation with you before. When I go back to Showplace, it hasn't been the same since I left Austin, where if I go with a crowd of people in Evansville, I'm actually more worried because it's going to be a bunch of teenagers on their phone, not engaged with the movie. And a crowd in Austin, it was always film people that were really into the movie. The biggest crowd I saw since being back in Evansville is probably It Chapter 2. And I was with my nephew, and I snapped at some kid next to me who was messing around on his phone for his date. And I just haven't had a good experience since coming back, a great theatrical experience since coming back to Evansville. And so therefore, the catalog titles I would pick that I think might work in Evansville.
But that's an interesting
you're
idea.
Asking me personally,
but you could do it that way as well. What you think might work in Evansville?
Well,
because obviously you can tell just from what you're saying. Audiences in Austin, it's not people with a group of kids. It's not teenagers on a date. This at Evansville, this is really the bread and butter. The people here are people bringing up a family, so they do wind up seeing Goonies again because they have to bring their children, or they want to see something again they share with their children. That's why the Harry Potter films, because right now that first one's almost 20 years old. People that came when that was initially in the theaters are bringing their kids now. So that
and Harry Potter
in Austin.
And Harry Potter is a religion for all the kids now hitting their teens or going. Mm-hmm. But what I would pick is the whole industry in general abandoned 3D pretty quickly, and then projectors started going against it. I would pick some of these great movies that were designed for 3D. Like if I could see Gravity in 3D again, holy shit, that would be something, because that was an amazing experience. Or hell, even something like Noah, or just a movie that was designed for 3D. Ted and I, when we did our Speed Racer episode, I do remember seeing it in 3D, and that was because it's a distinctly flat movie. When they played with 3D, it was really interesting. And whenever 3D was really popular at the time, I was like, why isn't anyone releasing Dial M for Murder? Or Hugo. Hugo's a movie I would go back to the theater right now for.
Hugo's one of the, and obviously I agree with you on that. it's one of the only films. Life of Pi, I think, is
Life
another
of Pi,
that are
good
really
producing.
made for the 3D process. I
And
think most of the 3D movies were just,
I've been so I think
it was a gimmick.
I think I've mentioned it on here, but the movies that made me podcast, they had the best of the decade earlier this year, and Joe Dante mentioned on there that Life of Pi almost isn't as a great a movie if you're not watching it in 3D. And what are the 3D watching options? Well, before pandemic, much less right now.
Well,
do you guys still have a 3D? Do you guys still have a 3D?
Yeah, I have the capability of running 3D, and IMAX occasionally will request that you run. So we'll have a 2D doubled up with a 3D, but I don't think there's been an exclusive 3D film in a couple of years. But the problem was that they did kill what was special about it. So if you only have Life of Pi and Hugo and Avatar and things that are actually designed to look good in 3D and not just something like that they had locked the film and then did an aftermarket process where they're like, we're going to make a movie that's already done, going to make it 3D. That's what killed the product, because after a while people just didn't think it was special anymore because it was just something they attached to everything.
I kind of got to the point where it was pretty early on. I just remember thinking 3D always enhances CGI. It always makes CGI look good. But also on that episode, they were talking about Mad Max Fury Road, and I had to think back. I think my first viewing of Fury Road was in 3D, and no one's is interested in seeing that movie in 3D.
Yeah. No, I and when you said that 3D, I was just thinking about old film and other than Ted and I actually discussed this once or twice. Avatar, Hugo, Life of Pi. I really don't know how many other films I would even add to that list that need to be seen in 3D. They're very few and far between. A lot of people say things like Polar Express, but that's
I'm good not to watch the Deadeye movie. I'm good.
Yeah, it's tough to watch, but it's kind of a Christmas classic. There's two long scenes where one of the characters is just sliding down this ice flume, and it clearly was made. It was designed to be seen in 3D, but it just goes on and on. Mm-hmm. It's like a 3-minute sequence, and it's unwatchable.
I remember seeing it. I think my first time at the Evansville or the East IMAX, and thinking, "Cool, movie is a roller coaster."
Well, that was one of the first 3D, especially in IMAX. That was one of the first 3D movies. So you get by on the novelty of it and how cool the 3D effect was, and then when you watch it, just standard version at home on television at Christmas, you realize, how lacking the film was without that, what was cool about that 3D. But you can't. I don't know if you could do that again.
So, what are you thinking is going to happen? I mean, I don't want to weigh too much on your epidemiology degree, but what do you... I mean, Bond is still lined up to come out. Dune has not moved, but Wonder Woman moved like a week before Dune. Mm-hmm. There's rumors that Soul, the Pixar movie, is going to go to Disney Plus, but it hasn't been said yet. And there's been some push saying, like, no, they're still going to push for theatrical on it too. They may end up doing what you were speaking to earlier with Mulan about doing both Disney Plus and theatrical. Ooh. I mean, when the announcement came that Showplace East is going to be the only theater running on Showplace right now, it said specifically we're going to wait until November to see what the studios are going to put back out.
Yeah, even before Soul, I think Disney is probably going to move Black Widow, or at least that's the rumor. So then, there's a couple things that come out in October. Right now, there's a Liam Neeson movie, Honest Thief, and there is Death on the Nile, which actually, just judging by how well Orient Express did and how well Knives Out did, which I think has a similar audience, Death on the Nile could be something that plays really well.
Was that a Thanksgiving movie?
Was it originally meant to be a Thanksgiving movie?
Yeah.
Or was Orient Express a Thanksgiving movie? I think Orient Express was a
But Death on the Nile. I mean, did they put out a trailer for that yet?
Oh, yeah.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it actually had. Oh, I can't recall what the song is, but it's a really. You should check it out. It's a really cool little trailer. And Gal, I mean, love her.
Okay. I'm sorry,
No,
I got stuck. Have you ever seen that YouTube video of the from the original Murder on the Orient Express trailer? Just because it has that really odd that what's up? I can't remember the popular song it plays for it, and it ends with the Branagh reveal as Hercule and Perot, and they put as many inappropriate songs behind it. It's like wow, and like
I have not seen that.
I'm
But
glad I was able to describe something that that does not have the charm of. I wish if we had show notes, I'd put it in the show notes, but the link to this trailer.
you still can.
We still can. I won't, but we still can.
The Death on the Nile trailer also has that same reveal. So he's narrating the trailer.
Man.
I still think it looks cool.
No, they're cool.
You know,
like
with
them.
Knives Out, I was a little. I didn't expect much. I thought this could be interesting. I like the cast, but then it really struck a chord with people. I think it was something unique.
You know, one of
the
coolest double features that I didn't. They just released it on Prime, Knives Out on Prime, so I didn't need to see it. But one of the coolest double features they had at the drive-in this summer was Jaws and Knives Out, which they don't have anything to do with each other, but is an amazing double feature.
Jaws is always rewatchable. Jaws, I think, would have been, but obviously the drive-ins had already pretty much poached it by then. But Jaws is one of those movies that I think plays well.
Yeah. Oh,
it
yeah.
Will always play well.
Cool. And the other reason
probably come out every summer.
I saw it with 47 meters down. Is it 47 down?
Oh yeah.
It was a bizarre. It was an odd movie.
That movie has its fans. Some people like it more than I do.
It was fine. It was fine. I'm like, I don't really. It's fine. But so Showplace right now is just waiting with bated breath on the studios, their decision they're going to make 2 weeks before November.
Well, I hope not, but yeah, I think you kind of have to just wait and see because it's something you don't have any control over. Yeah, I realize that especially with Disney, even though they're a giant corporation, not making all that money off the parks all summer, really put them in a bad position. So it would not surprise me if they did something like that again. It would. I still think it was a mistake. Mulan was a mistake. I think it'd be a mistake to push Black Widow again. But I think Bond is sticking.
Because you do think Bond's
they're
sticking?
Still sending out promo material with the day on it. So I don't think they're going to put good money after bad if they're not going to put that movie out. So literally this week I got promo material with that day.
Sony hasn't had any blockbuster it's had to worry about beyond that one, right?
I don't think so. Well, I mean, a lot of their productions got shut down. I'm sure everyone's did. But, but so I don't think they had No Time to Die has been pushed back twice now. So I think they're assuming at this point, if we keep pushing this back, it's going to have too much competition. If we kind of find the sweet spot, it might find its level. But Bond movies are always popular, so it does have a built-in audience. And
I forget what I had the thought today that there's no tax incentive or write-off option for the pandemic beyond because the only bailouts are the business bailout, the small business ones. So like it's not a production's not going to probably be able to say we would have normally made this amount of much in the year and disaster and an insurance level disaster
surely
happened.
This type of disaster isn't covered by insurance,
right?
But we're talking about giant studios that can absorb those kind of losses.
Yeah, or as I'm worried about, they absorb those losses by taking out all the mid-budget movies for the rest of our lives.
I think, to me, that's the problem with the overall structure of the exhibition model. The studios are only putting out giant misses. So let's say, for instance, something like Justice League earns $500 million and still loses money for the studio. I mean, that's nuts. You're putting yourself in a position where you're going to lose more often. Whereas, something like Knives Out, I think what it's $40 million to
Mm-hmm.
make. They spend a little money on marketing. Everybody, the investment isn't as great, but you come away with a film that may not have all the bells and whistles, but it's entertaining. It has an audience, and you got return on investment. The only studios that are doing anything like that, A24,
Mm-hmm.
Blumhouse, the small horror films, no one else is even making those movies anymore. And to me, that's the bigger issue. If all these other studios had uh, 5 or 6 other movies in the pipeline that they hadn't spent $200 million to make and need to spend another $200 million to market, they could take a chance on a couple things right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's several factors that are problematic there. Of like in our lifetimes, people like us, we want to watch great filmmakers work on bigger canvases to make more expansive stories. So we want them to work on more expensive movies, and it feels like the goalpost of them of like this is the amount of money they need to make their money back has been moving our entire lifetimes as more and more money has been put into the ad budgets for these movies to guarantee that they're going to make money. And then they've also been cross promotional and cross meet in transmedia, so like they're over across all these. That part's been frustrating, but also just, I mean, the mid budget is just. There was early speculation that Amazon or Netflix or even Apple was going to buy some of these theaters, especially if the
Amazon was going to buy AMC. I thought there was a rumor.
There was definitely that rumor going around, especially because of the timing of the what's they call the Paramount, not Accords, but the Paramount decree that got struck down this year. And it's been a visual, so like that could have happened, should have happened. I mean, I saw some interesting speculation that Disney was going to buy a bunch of AMC theaters and turn half of them into retail stores on top of things that shows their movies. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's definitely some thought that the subscription model could also transfer over into if one of these these studios buy a theater chain.
I don't know. That's interesting.
It's definitely with Netflix. It's the hope for mid budgets because Netflix is the only thing putting money into mid budgets.
You're right, but this is my concern about Netflix, and I've had this for a while, and I'm sure I've told you this already, but because we've had this conversation more often than we really should have, but that Netflix right now, they're doing things like Other Side of the Wind, and they're financing all these comedy specials and interesting documentaries, but those aren't the things that are paying the bills at Netflix. Those are the prestige things that draw you and I in. Tiger King is paying the bills. That's and Adam Sandler movies, and I don't have a problem with Adam Sandler. But these are lesser Sandler films.
Why can't they show those theatrically?
Well, they could. Honestly, we can't. We showed Irishman. I mean, I think that you can't have a relationship with those studios, with Netflix, with Amazon, and show their films. And hopefully we do more of that. I think that's a good way for them to offset the cost of those things, of a prestige feature, than because obviously the Sandler films and the Tiger Kings, the stuff like that's going to play really well. That's going to earn their money back for them. But I fear that Netflix is just going to. You remember how when we were kids, AMC was American Movie Classics, and they would show all these beautiful old films without interruptions in their original aspect ratio, and it was just a beautiful experience. And then they started to make their own programming, and if they show movies on AMC any longer, it's never anything that would be interesting or unique. It's just middle of the road stuff, because that's what the general audience wants. And Netflix is so big now, with however many subscribers they have, and I'm sure it's in the tens of millions. If 70% of those people aren't interested in watching Other Side of the Wind, how many more of those are we going to get?
Well,
But not, there's obviously that was the only one. That's not.
No,
I mean
no,
that
no.
type of movie.
Well, I mean, it's going to be years before we figure out exactly how Netflix is making their money, just because a lot of what they're doing is they're writing stuff off and saying that it's a library that they're building, supposedly.
Yeah.
So I don't see that, especially like Netflix didn't end up buying the new Scorsese movie, but Apple Plus went in after its budget ballooned, and Paramount was like, "We're not going to pay for it," and Apple needed a prestige movie and some filmmakers on their thing. And I mean, there's been that weird thing with Scorsese and Noah Baumbach's movies pretty much exclusively on Netflix, and if you want a physical copy of them, Criterion's going to eventually put all these out. So there's a lot of this. They still have their traditional avenues to get. I don't know. They're still getting the tokenism of a theatrical experience, even with the expensive movie. When, like you said, the average moviegoers, these are just prestige things. These are their Oscar potential. These aren't the things the average person is going to go see anymore.
As big as Marriage Story was, with Oscar nominations, obviously it was probably their biggest, because even more so than Irishman, I think it was their biggest prestige film that came out last year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming, and I think you could make this assumption pretty easily, anywhere from 60 to 70% of people that have a Netflix subscription did not watch that movie.
I want to complain, but that sounds fair.
You can complain, but I'd say those numbers are reversed for Tiger King, whereas 70% of the people did watch that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also I have that jealousy factor of like I wish
are speaking. That's what they want.
I wish movies had the water cooler factor that Tiger King had.
Oh yeah, and that's such a rare thing. It's when was the last time? I mean, obviously you and I talk about movies. We talk about movies with Ted. Obviously, I work in a movie theater, so anyone that will listen to me ranting about whatever movies we have. But it's kind of a limited audience for some of these things. Like with Tenet, you and I could talk about that for probably another hour. If Ted were here, we could talk for 2 hours. But lots of people just aren't going to be able to stay with that conversation because not only did they not see the movie, they probably didn't want to see the movie.
Yeah, which good for Christopher Nolan. So I think, I mean, I figure you're gonna be a reoccurring guest though, just because whenever Trump.
I would like to be a reoccurring guest at your house so we could be friends and have normal conversations and
we don't have
that
to
nature.
Do we have to record them?
I mean, I've seen you twice in the last since March. I haven't really seen anyone, so I can't.
Well, I haven't seen anything.
I've only seen my mother once or twice, so it's not just you. But I'm saying I do think that it would be nice to have a recurring like I was telling you, I haven't talked to Ted about the new Bob Dylan record, and that seems crazy.
Yeah,
because we would have at some point have talked about that thing 7 or 8 or 9 different times, and also had kind of different takes on it by now. We also didn't talk about the Robbie Robertson documentary, Once We're Brothers. That's something that I definitely feel like we both would have enjoyed, having bounced that off the other person and just see what their take was.
I know Ted's been here and he's been on a couple of times, and we've discussed it. I'm
familiar with your podcast.
We worried about you, and we've asked how Smith's doing. So last question: how are you doing right now?
Oh, fantastic! I enjoyed my time off.
You don't have to be fantastic. All of us need to be honest with each other.
Right? No, I get it. I felt like during quarantine, even when I was at my heaviest, I still felt really good because I got a chance to go to these parks with my kids. I enjoyed my time there, and it fills you up. Just doing those kind of things was positive. But since I've been back, I've kind of got back into a little bit of a regular routine, and I feel healthier because I've lost some of that weight again. And I really do still, after all these years, I enjoy going to the movies. I enjoy being at the movies. I like watching movies. And even though I have watched a lot of movies at home recently, it's not the same.
Yeah.
I was telling my wife this, and this is really the audience for this bullshit is very minuscule, because I could tell when I was telling her, like, her eyes were glazing over. She was like, "What the? Why? Why did I marry you?" Anyway, I told you I was watching Civilizations, Kenneth Clark documentary. It was I don't know if it was BBC, but it was definitely British. It was filmed in '66, but it was kind of groundbreaking because it was one of the first documentaries where they actually took this old British dude, Kenneth Clark, to these places. So he was at Chartres Cathedral, or he was at the Sistine Chapel, and so he's talking about these works of art. But because they were there, I'm listening to it on headphones. I have a Roku, and I can put on the headphones so I don't wake anybody up.
Okay.
Because I like it really loud. So I'm watching this documentary, and not only do you see, you get the information he's giving you by talking about it, and it's a dry British film, so it is a little dry. But, so you get the information about, what he's talking about, the art or the architecture. But then you also get the room tone of the Sistine Chapel in 1966, because I've got it on headphones. So it just, the information that I'm getting from that, I can't do elsewhere. And I think that translates not directly, but similarly to seeing a movie at the movie theater. I'm not going to turn up and I like to listen to the TV loud.
Yeah.
If I'm watching a movie, I want to hear the gun. I want to hear, if you're watching a Western, the gunshots should be, they should be loud. They should be scary.
Hey, I'm Mr. 7.1 here.
So I can't do that at home. I need to see that at the theater. So Goonies in the movie theater is a better experience than it would be even at home with the best. I mean, obviously, if you had Kanye West set up, maybe, that guy has the best of the best. But, for the common man, we can't have a system like that. So there's nothing else that's going to beat that experience of going to the movies. And, I get to do that. And I still think that's the best way to see a movie.
So what you're saying is I need to come in and go see Kajillionaire.
You should come in and see Goonies.
Sigh. On that note, I just want to thank everybody for listening. Aaron Smith, thank you for coming into my basement and doing this. I appreciate it.
Anytime.